Well, thanks all for coming to our digital health seminar series with Mengyan Zhang invited today. Before we start the talk, just to introduce the digital health seminar series to everyone, we are organizing this seminar series every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. The place keeps changing, then keep track of where it is organized every day. And if not, just join online. We try to invite industrial partners or academic partners as well. Online, there may be some industrial partners also from Southwest England and Wales, because we are collaborating with LEAP. I mean, I am a researcher from LEAP. And then this digital health seminar series is also part of the dissemination of research. Then, yeah. Some housekeeping. If you are in person, there will be a tablet just going around. If you can register your name, just to keep track of numbers and how many people attend these meetings. The webinar will be recorded and made available online after. If you are concerned about that, it will be probably on YouTube. If you are concerned about that, just please let us know. For the online attendees, please stay muted during the presentation. In principle, you should join muted already. And we will have, we have a 1 hour slot. At the end, we will have 15 minutes, more or less, of questions. And after the talk, we have still this room booked for 30 minutes extra if you want to network with other digital health enthusiasts. Then, yeah, for online, please just write your questions in the chat. Or use the question and answer functionality, and we can read the questions, or you can ask to read the question yourself. And then, yeah, just let's introduce Mengyan, who is, she will talk about learning to decide under uncertainty, from scientific discovery to public health. She's at the moment a lecturer in the School of Computer Science at the University of Bristol. She is also a visiting researcher at the University of Oxford. She's a member of the Machine Learning and Global Health Network. She was a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Oxford and a PhD. She got a PhD from the Australian National University, affiliated to the Data 61, which is the data and digital specialist arm of Australia's National Science Agency. And the research interest, she's research interests are in sequential decision making in machine learning, including multi-R Bandit, informal learning and active learning. And the application areas that she's interested mostly is disease surveillance, synthetic biology, and public policy, and more. Then let's welcome Mengyan. And the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Miguel, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. I'm Mengyan, and today I'll talk about some decision making and the association with the scientific discovery and public health. I'll just skip that because Miguel did an excellent job on introduce that. Okay, so in today's talk, I will firstly introduce some background of sequential decision making algorithms in terms of what the motivations and the definitions of these problems, and maybe some applications of that. And then there's two main parts I want to talk about. The first part is the scientific discovery, which I use a case study we did before for biological sequence design. And the second one would be related to the public health, and we're mainly focusing on one recent work on active disease surveillance. Okay, everyone, now assume we're not in this lecture room, but actually we're in a casino room. And everyone is allocated to £100, and you can play around with different slot machines. And each slot machine is associated with reward distribution. And you can, for example, play one machine, you can spend £5 at once, and then you'll get your reward sampled from the reward distribution. And you know nothing about which slot machines is the best. Imagine that there's a reward distribution, and some of the slot machines tends to give you a better reward in expectation. And your task is to figure out how to spend your 100 pounds in the casino. And the goal is to maximize your cumulative gain at the end. So anyone want to have a guess? How do you like spend the money?
High risk, high gain.
Okay, so what's the concrete strategy? It's just like there's say I guess 5 slot machines, and how do you do?
So you've no idea which slot machine has which response, right?
Yeah, so you kind of need to try it out at the beginning. Yeah.
I will live with the £100.
Okay. Other strategy, yeah.
You try a few out and see which one gives you, like, you explore a bit first, and then after you find one which works well, then you keep on doing it.
Okay, good strategy. Yeah.
I was wondering if you break it down to like smallest units, like you've got pence in each machine, and then see which machines pay off. And then,
Is that like uniformly divided to different machines?
I don't know, just split it up. To the
Yeah.
smallest.
Well, yeah, that's also great. So keep in your mind what's your strategy in your mind, and I'll introduce some, method, and you can match. Actually, everyone in the room, some of the strategies actually is studied in the Bandit theory, and have maybe some ones is like kind of optimal ones. But let's say this problem is actually defined in math and computer science. Is called the multi-bandit problem. And the problem is basically there's like a decision maker, is everyone here, and you can interactively like to make decisions with the environment, and you can say there's different slot machines. Oh,
It's touchscreen.
oh, magic. Okay, cool. So you in the environment there's different like slot machines, and each one has reward distributions. I don't know why there's no. So imagine there's different kind of like reward distributions. I think it just magically disappear like the mountain here. And you can once you make a decision, you can draw a reward from the reward distribution. And the goal here is to maximize the cumulative reward. You also, this one kind of task. The other kind of task is you want to identify the best arm. Like you want to find what is the best slot machine after you spend all your budget. And in some cases, like here, we are treating like each slot machine as like discrete and unrelated machines. And in some cases, we can consider the correlations between different like choices, different arms. And then it becomes the problem of Bayesian optimization. We have an unknown reward function here, and the goal here is we want to find the optimal points of like correspondingly the maximize the cumulative reward. So it's you can think of like to be a continuous version, or it can be a correlated version of the multi-bandits. So you might have noticed like of all the problem, like the casino problem and all the mathematical formulation, there's a dilemma here. It's called the exploitation and exploration dilemma. So when you walk into a casino and you have no information, and you have to maybe spend a little bit of your budget to do some exploration, and this is something like you have to try and to try the choices you haven't tried before, or they have to try the choices with high uncertainty. Once you have some, I guess, information, you then have a choice to stick on the best choice with the current information, or you have the choice of do more exploration during the process. Imagine there's a lot of like choices. And this dilemma actually happening in our daily life in terms of like after this talk, maybe for dinner, you hang out with your friends, and what's your choice of the restaurant, right? So you can just choose the one your favorite restaurant, and to just try it out. And there's kind of no risk. It's like a not too bad a choice. You know what the taste is. But you can also try some, new restaurants and try to explore some choices, and it might give you a low reward, like you don't like it, but it can also be your next favorite. So this like iterative decision making gives us this kind of dilemma here. And this also happening in the like recommender system. Here I put in like TikTok or like the news recommender system. So it's all iterative in terms of when you give the feedback to the recommender system, it can actually learn from your feedback and then optimize their decision making. So correspondingly, we can think of like each article or each video as an arm, and then the reward is the user click or likes. And the goal here is to sequentially optimize the cumulative clicks or likes in the recommender system. So it's a kind of matching to like the abstract formulation. There's also some other possible applications. This is the one we did before for SML. It's consider a different situation of risk-averse decision making. Each arm here is a vaccine allocation strategy, and you can observe here that for the reward distribution, it's a heavy tiled. Like here, you have the like kind of outliers or heavy tiles here. And for those kind of decision makings, usually we are not only care about the mean of the distribution, which is usually how we define the best arms in many cases. And instead, we consider, okay, we might want to be risk averse and think of quantiles, and median would be one of the possibilities. But like here in this work, we actually consider a different level of quantiles as well. So this just gives you an example of we want to find the best allocation strategy, and by placing the vaccine dose to different age groups and interact with the real world environment, and then at the end to identify the best like vaccine allocation strategy. So far, so good. Any questions for the introduction? Okay, nice. So hopefully I give you some like concrete ideas of what the sequential decision making means and what the interesting place it is. For the first part of the talk, I'll talk about the scientific discovery and use the bacterial ribosome binding site design as an example, which is a work I did in my PhD. So the problem here is we consider the ribosome binding site, which it's like a sequence can influence or control the protein expression level, and we consider in E. coli to design the RBI sequences. When I say design, it's more like a synthetic biology setting in terms of, say, if we look at this whole sequence and we focus on the red color part, and for each of the position, we have alternatives, ACGT like alternatives, and for the whole design space, like we consider here is a 6 position, so we have like over 4,000 possibilities. It's like a 4,000 arms in the setting we just explained. And the goal here is, okay, we have so many choices, and we have synthetic biologists that they want to find what is the best RBI sequence to choose, which will give us the highest possible translation initiation rate, which just measuring the protein expression level. And we have some existing like data, or we have some existing RBIs and corresponding with the TIR data. But most of the like RBIs and the corresponding label, we don't know. It's exactly like the casino example that we don't know what the slot machines is corresponding to and how do we make the wise decision making so that we can use limited budget to identify the best here is the best sequences. So here we consider the budget around 400, which is like 10% of the whole design space. And we design the sequences in batches due to the limitation of the physical constraints. It's like it's time consuming, so we have to do it in batch in a group together to wait the. It's kind of like that. It's with the cells to grow. And the goal here is to identify the RBI sequence with the highest possible protein expression level. So it's just mapping back to the citing that like you can think of like each arm here is an RBI sequence. And if we measure the correlations and think of like to place it in a continuous space, it can be also thinking in terms of way we are finding like the optimal point of an unknown function. And to measuring the correlations, we usually need some assumptions for the reward smoothness. So when I say smoothness, it basically means that if two x is similar to each other, like two RBI sequence is similar to each other, then we assume their function values is also similar to each other. And the smooth level, like how similar it is controlled by the smooth level. And here we consider the Gaussian process, where it's defined by its mean function and covariance function. And this covariance function here is the magic of correlation, like how much like the two axes similar to each other and controls the target value. And the benefit to consider the Gaussian process modeling here is that it's illustrated here, right? So we not only have the predictions of its mean function, but we actually also have its like a confidence interval just modeling directly by the Gaussian process. And here is one example of the like decision-making or acquisition function. So far, I haven't talked about any like how to solve the problem, and this is the first one I mentioned. It's called the upper confidence bound algorithm or acquisition function, and the idea is actually quite straightforward. So it has two terms of the acquisition function. The first one is the posterior mean for exploitation. It's basically like the how the Gaussian process thinks or like the function value could be. So it's modeling by the posterior mean, and okay. And the second term here is the posterior standard deviation. It gets for the exploration, and it's actually kind of mapping to the confidence interval here. So if we plus them together, it's and with some balancing term here, it becomes like the upper confidence bound, like illustrated by the orange color here. And the accuracy function here just tells us we want to pick the one with the highest score. And here it kind of like x equal to 2 gives us the best option. And for x here, I just illustrated use the number here, but you can think of like for each of like the discrete x here corresponding to the RBI sequence. And just to mention, like the balancing term beta t here is depending on t, so it's meaning like it's changing with respect to time, and usually it's decreasing with respect to time. So it means that when we have more data points and we do more exploitation and less exploration, and focusing more on the optimal points. Yeah, So that's the UCB scores here, and in theory, it's proved to be optimal with some specific choice of beta T here, and in practice, it also works quite well in a lot of like applications. But to recall, we are not only needing like one recommendation at one batch, but we actually need a lot of like recommendations. Here, I just use like 2 recommendations as example to say. Sorry. So one choice here is we just to recommend. Sorry, just to recommend the top 2 UCB scores, so that if you look at this, I separated to like different choices with the dots here. I hope you can see clearly here. But then the 2 choices is actually this the 2 choices illustrated by the red line here. But then it might have a problem. As you can see here, it can be 2 very similar data points. And then it can be the situation is like you recommend a batch of data points, but those data points are actually very similar to each other. And it doesn't really provide a lot of new information by selecting, 2 kind of repeating data points. And we want the recommendation in one batch have more, diversity. So another strategy here we consider is how about we just recommend the first data points, and then assuming we already observe that data points, we don't really have the observation, so we don't have y, like we don't have like the target value to update the whole posteriors, but actually if we assume we have already observed these data points, and you can say here, like if we want to update our posteriors, the mean function here is remains the same, like because we don't actually know what the target value is, but we can update the posterior standard deviation because it's only depending on the x. So I'm just listing some equations here to convincing you that the standard deviation, the covariance term here, if you just look at that, it's only x, and k is the kernel, so it doesn't really depending on you observing the labels. But don't worry about the details of what those symbols is. The whole point I want to say is here, if we observe the data points here, we can actually update the confidence interval. And if we update that, you can observe like the UCB score changes because it's the this term, like the second term here changes. So that here we actually, if we assume we have already observed this data point, and to recommend the second data point is actually we can choose the second data point to be very different with the first one. Yeah.
Can you remind me why you were looking at, in particular, at the maximum values instead of the ones that had more variance?
Like the UCB scores.
Yeah.
Because
this is the output of the function that we were trying to estimate, isn't it?
Sorry, you mean this one?
Yeah,
or
X.
So here is like, yeah. So what we want to do, we want to optimize the function, the unknown function. That's right. But because we don't know like a lot of information about the function, so we need to do like exploitation, kind of that way. And to picking the data points, maybe associated with a high standard deviation, is guiding us to do more exploration, to prioritizing to select data points with high uncertainty.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can discuss after.
Okay.
Yeah, I just for me myself to clarify something.
Okay, cool. Any other questions about that? Okay. So with that, and we design like the whole design, build, test, learn circle, DBTL, and for the build and for the I think build and test in the pipeline of the our collaborators in the lab, they construct the based on our recommendations and calculate the TIR, like so to measuring the protein expression level and give back to us. And you can say like this, like the cells to grow the cells, and it's kind of like in a box, and we do in a batch. And we also, like after we got the data here, we comes to like what I mentioned in terms of we do Gaussian process regression and to generate the predictions of mean and standard deviation. And this is the learn part, and it's usually when we talk about okay, we do predictions, we do AI. It means like we do like those learn part, and we predict with usually a large amount of data. But in our case, we do very small amount of data and to collect data iteratively and refitting into the model. And once we have the predictions, we also we make that into the design part, which is like more like a decision part. We calculate, in our case, we calculate the upper confidence bound score and make it to recommend the top RBUS sequences. And then that gives us the recommendations to the build stage. So let's say some results. So there's a lot of like groups. Most of them are not so important. So the thing you need to know is this one is the benchmark, which is the known best results we have so far before we do the experiment, and we just make it our best benchmark, and as one like to normalize that one. And we also do some, control groups of we already have the benchmark, and we modify it by some biology-based rules and some uniform random probabilistic distribution. Like so, those are like kind of control groups without any machine learning or Bandit design. And this last 4 groups are the Bandit groups, and meaning like for each group we are doing like a Nantes sequences, and you can see at the beginning, like the Bandit 0 group is at the beginning is only trained by historical data, which could be quite noisy and different from our situation. So you can say it's quite similar to random. And then for the rest of the groups, it's like we do it iteratively based on our DBTL circle. And you can see that like from Bandit 1, we already have some like data points which is beyond the benchmark, and it's actually much better. We found something much better than the benchmark, which is actually super hard in synthetic biology, because like the benchmark is actually something like people like trying to find and work a lot to improve it. And we also illustrate like the exploration and exploitation balance on the right-hand side to give you an idea of what those data points looks like. And you can say that at the beginning, it has a lot of like explorations, like the red colors is like explorations. And on the Bandit 3 group, we have more exploitation. And those high values is more coming from the exploitation. So it's actually matching to Miguel's question in terms of why don't we just do like the exploitation and to only based on the predicted mean. And it actually gives us the best ones. But what I want to mention here is if we only do that, we might actually let me just show you another plot. Is it's a technical thing in terms like with clustering like all the design space. And if we only do like the like to optimize the predicted mean, it can end up only to concentrate, for example, in this area, like in one area that have the high values, but stopping to explore other possible places. And the exploration actually helps us to find the optimal data points, because at the beginning, like we don't actually have the clue, and we don't, even we do exploitation, we don't like for example in Bandit 2 here, right, we don't actually have a much higher sequences. So the exploration here is actually quite useful when we consider like we want to gain more information in the whole process to learn the whole space, and those kind of UCB balance guide us how to when to do explorations and when to do exploitations implicitly. And so as a result here, our DBTL circle actually helps to increase the results, the protein expression level by up to 35% compared with the strong benchmark RBI sequences. So just to summarize here, what the most important lesson here we learned is that the uncertainty guided the decision making is important when the design space is much larger than the budget, and we need to be able to explore the space and use the sequential decision making algorithms to guide our exploration and exploitation. And this whole process accelerates the scientific discovery, especially when the design space is quite large. And in this area of like big data, and we have a lot of like data of foundation models, where the opportunity would be like to combining with what we have and what we have in the historical data and what we can capturing into the foundation model to, and then to do test time adaptation using the DBTL circle, and to be able to like make use of what we have and then recommend and adapt it to our new task in this circle. Okay, cool. So this is the first part. Any questions for the, yeah?
When you were showing the Bandit 1, 2, and 3, on the exploration, is this the exploration weight change over time? I mean, is this Bandit 1, for example, one repetition changing over time the weight, the balance?
So this is not the direct, you mean this term?
This balance here,
yeah.
It's not this.
No, this is not this direct term, because this beta t is with time t, and
Yeah.
for our case we only have like a 4 time step, like 4 batches. So it's actually the beta is the same for each data points for each batch.
Okay.
And this score here is what like we calculated by like how the like we have like the posterior mean and standard deviation, and we calculate like the rate between them. It's like some calculations to represent like whether it have a higher standard deviation or higher mean. So it's not a directly ratio, but it's something similar.
Okay.
And yeah, the color here represents like the level of exploration. Good question. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was thinking, what sort of foundation model are you thinking about using? Is it like a biology specific foundation model, or just?
Yeah. So in this particular setting here, so it really depends on the what is the biological sequence we are considering here. So if it's relates to, so what we are considering next step would be promoter or like a protein level of design. So it would be more like AlphaFold or like those kind of like large models. But if we consider focusing on the like the DNA sequence, for example, it could be a simpler one, like a bird related one, could be something. But again, like we can also thinking more in terms of current foundation models in terms of a transformer-based models. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just thinking about the potential application of this into healthcare. I'm thinking this sounds sort of familiar to in terms of sort of adaptive behavior sort of models. And I guess in this case, the only risk, I'm thinking of the exploration stage, and there's a risk attached to it. In this case, I guess it's time, because it's like, well, maybe you end up in the dead and money again. Do you know, I just wondered, could you talk or expand it a little further if you were to have to weight exploration with an additional risk? Thinking if you were sort of applying this into, say, self-management of a chronic condition.
Yeah, that's.
There may be times when actually selecting exploration may be higher risk at that point than go for the exploit, play safe.
Yeah, that's actually excellent question. So the question is, if we do a lot of exploration in healthcare, would it be too risky, or like in many cases? I think the answer is yes. So in my mind, I'm thinking in terms of, for example, treatment recommendations in healthcare, and to maybe assist the clinicians to make decisions. And when we correspondingly to think of if we do more exploration, is in terms of if we have many like drugs and we can allocate to the patients. And yes, that could be risky. But in the case of if we do more like healthy behavior recommendation, it's in the case of also for the drugs, if all the drugs is kind of like know a lot of harms or like beneficial, if we already pass some threshold of like clinician testing, and we're just only trying to find the optimal, that then is not so risky. But if we say one of the drug or one of the recommendation it's can harm the patient, then it's maybe risky, and that's might actually relates to the risk-averse decision-making I mentioned at the beginning. And when we think of like the distributions, we can consider how we define the best arm. So for example, if we one arm, like one treatment, actually have a lot of risk to bring like a dangerous impact to patients, we can define it as not a good arm because it's quite dangerous. So that's we can deal with it with the algorithm design, but we need to be careful as well if it's the real world cases.
Yeah, and we have 20 minutes to finish. I'm not sure if it's enough or
yeah.
It's up to you to decide it.
Maybe we can leave it to the end. Yeah. Okay. So the second part is more like in public health and epidemiology, and this kind of also switch the setting of the method design, and this is our recent work in PNAS publication. So the problem here is we consider the disease outbreak. And you can say that here we have different locations, and okay, it looks quite dangerous, and they have like traveling information. And the problem we're trying to ask is again like how we allocate the data, and the testing samples to different locations, given a limited amount of resource, and how can we collect data that is most useful to us. And the most useful to us here actually means that if we collect the data, can we predict well on different locations what would be the prevalence of the disease? So the model we're considering here, it's still sequential decision-making algorithm, but it's a bit different than the Bandit algorithm I mentioned. But you can say it's also like a quite familiar loop here. And we have a machine learning model, like a surrogate model. You can think of like the Gaussian process model I mentioned. and it also need to make predictions. And the most different part is that here we are not trying to find an optimal, but we are trying to collect data so that it can help us to build a better machine learning model to be able to predict well with a limited amount of budget. So this is the sampling part for the active learning strategy. And one possible way here, just list one example, is to select the data points with the highest entropy, which quantifies the uncertainty. So, for example, we can select data with high uncertainty. So just compare with the UCB and the example we give for the Bandit, and you can think of we are only doing like the second term here, not like doing optimization at all for the first term, like the posterior mean. And here is our whole pipeline. It has a lot of information, but let's go from the left part. So we are considering the. Can they still hear me? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we consider graph-based active learning. So the graph here is I can also stand here. So the graph here recommend it's illustrating the mobility graph, like the traveling information. And here we consider the weighted undirected graph. So if there's an edge between the two nodes, it basically means there's a traveling between the two places beyond some threshold. So we kind of like simplify the real cases. And we for the nodes, we only consider like the binary labels in terms of either to be infected or uninfected in these cases. And we like to simulate the disease distributions by stochastic suspicious infectious process. And at some time step, we collect the static reward distribution, like the disease distribution. And to design, like this is like the simulation part. And then we design an active learning strategy to recommend like how we figure out the disease status, like to be able to predict which locations are infected and which locations are uninfected. So when I say infected and uninfected, so in practice it would be like for a location, it has some like the percentage of infected people beyond some threshold. So we're doing some simplification here. And we for the adaptive test deployment here, what we do here is we find the data points to recommend based on the surrogate model's prediction. And so there's like allocation strategy here, which I'll mention in a minute. And once we recommend a location to get the samples, and we would observe, we just imagine the policymakers would allocate the testing samples, and we would observe for like one location, the selected location is infected or uninfected. And then we feed back into our surrogate model so that it would predict, again, like the updated belief of the infection probability. And based on that, we can do the new recommendations. So it's still very much like the DBTL circle I just mentioned, but in a setting that we want to collect data to be able to predict for the labels for all the locations instead of trying to optimize like what the location is about. So the most dangerous, I think. And is the setting kind of clear to everyone? Okay. So the policy here we consider is called local entropy. So again, recall like the entropy here. Don't need to care about what the concrete definitions, but it's right. It illustrates that the uncertainty level of a location. And but here, what we care about is not only the entropy of the node itself, but actually to represent like the influence over the whole graph. Because just imagine that like if we pick one node in a graph, it actually contains information for its neighborhood. And so we're designing like a weighted sum of a version of entropy here. And the weight here is distance weighted is corresponding like if we say the illustration here, if the distance is larger, the weight will be smaller. It represents a decrease in influence of the whole entropy or whole uncertainty. So so the whole idea is that in a graph-based active learning, we want to pick the node with the highest uncertainty level, and the highest uncertainty, including its own uncertainty, but also the uncertainty summing over from its neighborhood, and it's weighting by its like the distance to the neighbors. Yeah.
Doesn't that mean that it's all sampling known uncertainties?
Sorry?
So what you're looking at here is all about the known uncertainties, so the uncertainty you can predict.
Yeah.
So what about uncertainties that are unpredictable?
Oh, okay. So here the uncertainty is a kind of abstract like word here, but how we calculate the uncertainty is for each node, we have infections probability prediction. So this is like the probability. And based on the probability, we can calculate a number, which is like use this formula, is the entropy term. So we are using like the entropy to represent the uncertainty of a node. And the unknown uncertainty, you mean
So
the
that brought to predictable uncertainty.
Yeah.
I guess what this doesn't account for, it doesn't seem to account for, is any unknown uncertainty. So things you're not aware of.
Yes, I think in that case, we're just ignoring those uncertainties, and we only consider the probabilistic like uncertainty.
Isn't the unknown uncertainty the thing that often trips you up the most?
So can you give example of what the unknown?
Basically, you've got a landscape of probabilities, yeah, but there's going to be times when that's just broken, yeah, and there's a step change, and it's that these models can't necessarily account for.
Oh, so when you say time, do you mean like so for this case, like when we predict here, it's just a static version of the disease distribution, so there's no time series or temporal changes?
No, well, I'm not sure if I'm explaining this right or if I've even got this right in my head, but there are times when something happens or there is some sort of element that needs to be accounting for, which can't necessarily be predicted in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the time, the time series is something to predict the uncertainty that you're likely to encounter, but sometimes you can't. There are things that happen that are unexpected, and that's what often trips up the models.
But you are still thinking of like a time series model, right?
I mean, it could be, but it doesn't have to be. Yeah.
So again here, or what I think what we consider here is a more simple version of the uncertainty is measuring in terms of like the data uncertainty. So meaning like if we have the node here and the uncertainty coming from we don't have enough information of the node. Not in terms of like, I don't know what you mean, maybe like the situation changes and some unexpected, like in the real world cases.
Some other disease which arises, which interacts with your disease in a completely unknown, unforeseen way. You know, how does that affect the model? The model can't account for that at the moment. Yeah, so for this case, we consider only like the static version, like for example, for this case, it's a static version, so there's no possible changes like influenced by other disease or by other unexpected. So it would be just static data here, and we're
predicting with respect to that. But I think what the point you make is quite important and interesting, and is also quite practical in epidemiology, because when we consider like the disease, like we will have the data and we are trying to use like machine learning model to predict it, it actually have a lot of factors that we don't know, and it might not fit into our model. For example, here we use, like for most of our experiments, we just use like SI or SRR model to do simulation. So that is, you know, quite predictable. But for the real cases, it's always not. So in that case, what we can do is we can either to have more data to fit into it, or we need to be able to capturing more signals from the real world. Otherwise, the prediction would not work so well. Okay.
So that probably is not so.
Yeah. So okay. How much time do I left? Okay, 10 minutes.
7 minutes.
Yeah. I'll
stay after for questions.
Okay, cool. I'll skip some of the parts. I'll explain some of the results here. So this is like I illustrate like two kind of like graph structures, and one with different modularity. And on the right hand side, we show like the results of the different strategies, and ours is the local entropy, the red color. And so yeah, on the first row of each graph here, it shows the AOC scores. So how we measure the performance of the different strategies would be like with any amount of like budget, and after we're running out of like those, for example, 15 budget, and what would be the corresponding prediction scores of the different strategies. And the higher the score is, the better the performance is. And on the second row here, we basically do a like more illustration and to rank the different policies. So if you say like the data points to be like more colorful, here it basically means it's ranking the first with all the policies. And just to have a look at all the policies, and our policy, the local entropy policy, it's most time works the best in most of the iterations. And especially when we have a very small amount of budget, and comparing with the node entropy, for example, like if you look at here, like the local entropy have more like ranking first compared to the local entropy, because it's making use of the like local uncertainty, not only the node uncertainty itself. And also compare with we also include the random policy here as the dashed line as a benchmark in terms of whether it's I think for here is also there. So to compare how much improvement we have if we run our policies. Okay, I think I'll skip some of them. So here, I just what I want to mention here is that what I explained in the previous work, we focus on the static version of disease distributions, and here we have an ongoing work on a dynamic temporal version in terms of I think what was just asked question in terms of if the disease evolves over the time, and if we're combining the disease evolving and the active recommendation together, what would happen? And this is an ongoing work, and we consider the temporal circuit models for graphs, considering graph neural networks and the transformer neural process based models to predict, like forecasting the disease signals. and we're also considering more effective policies to capturing the disease evolving with the temporal active learning and reinforcement learning strategies. I think I'll just skip this as well. So one thing, I think that is the transformer neural process model we just published in AI Stats, and we're considering to use that in the framework. So if any of you interested in this, we can talk later on. After this work, we are asking a bigger question in terms of how AI can help us to make better decisions in public health. And we have a paper in Nature recently to discuss this. Instead of this paper, we have some sections to focus on the paper and the problem I just discussed in terms of the iterative decision making in public health. And you can see here what we need to consider is we have mortality growth, and we want to forecasting nowcasting and forecasting with respect to time, and also to based on the historical reconstructions. When we have an AI model, we also need to have a decision-making policy to assist the human policymakers and update our belief for the whole framework. So this whole pipeline gives us the discussion and idea of what is needed in public health, and we're not only need to consider the forecasting problem, but also the decision-making problems. That's just what I mentioned here. And one thing, also if in many of the real-world data, we have aggregated missing of multifidelity data. That's also quite important to consider. And at the end, I want to mention there's opportunity for funded 8-week summer project for internships. So it's a collaboration with National University of Singapore, and we would focus on the reinforcement learning driven interventions for health behavior change with wearable devices trials. And for this internship, we would focus on the large language model guided simulation-based optimization, and prepare for the wearable device trials. And I think that's really fits the digital health topic today. So we are looking for students with background in machine learning and experience in Python. So if you know anyone is interested in that, just let me know. And I want to acknowledge the Machine Learning Global Health Network. We are institutes across 7 institutes, including Imperial, Oxford, Bristol, and also other places in different countries. And we're working on those interesting problems to covering machine learning and global health. And we also have some maybe activities here at Bristol previously. Okay, this slides just summarize the whole talk. I start with to introduce the sequential decision-making algorithms and the casino scenario, and you can recall what you have in your mind how you want to spend your money, and to compare with whether you want to use UCBs or you want to do exploration first and do exploration after that. And cover scientific discovery for biological sequence design and also the public health disease surveillance topics. So that's all for the talk. Thank you.
You need to go. Yeah. We have still some time for questions if you want to ask any questions. Yeah, but thanks for the talk. Any questions? Let me mention that I'm not sure what I don't know the name of the person that was talking about that type of uncertainty. But I think he may refer to epistemic uncertainty versus aleatoric uncertainty. And then your decisions based on the posterior probability of a model being epistemic, basically what the model can know, and not accounting for aleatoric uncertainty that this model may not account for. But I don't know if he was referring to that. Do you know it?
I agree with what you said. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions online? We don't have questions online. Any questions here? No? Are we?
Yeah, maybe I can have a question about the UCB method in your first field. Yeah, you mentioned it is an optimal method, right? So I'm curious in what aspect or in which level it is optimal. It is from the theoretical aspect.
Yeah, so in multi-event, I haven't mentioned in the talk. People usually define a regret notion. So it's very different. They have different notions of regret, but basically it's the optimal value minus what you get for the reward, and people can calculate the regret bound, regret upper bound and lower bound for like in expectation usually, and the UCB algorithm is known to be optimal, like it's matching bounds for upper and lower bound with like specific choice of beta. So for the specific like CPU ZB here, I think in this paper is winning like time awards. I forgot the name, but it has some like theoretical results for the regret bound.
Maybe conversation, but what's the difference between like transformer neural processing and other neural processes?
Yeah, so this okay, so this one so first of all I didn't use the full name. The full name is quite long. Bias, scan, attention, transformer, neural process. So neural process is a priceless work we have. They have like in the literature, so compare with neural process, transformer neural process is just making the neural part as a transformer. So that is. And but for our work here, we are having so we have some like for example scan, attention, and other like designs to make it more efficient. And importantly here, we also have a bias term to be able to capturing the spatial temporal changes. So that's a brief story about that.
This question online.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for a fantastic talk. Let me see. The question maybe about unknown. The question about unknown unknowns. How do you see these models being adopted in clinical workflows? I'm not sure.
Clinical
workflows. But what in particular?
I don't know, maybe they're worried about.
Oh yeah.
You don't know if you use a clinical.
Yeah. Maybe if we know that we are using models that may not know the unknowns, how do you see these being actually used in clinical settings where we can only account for the things that we know?
Oh yeah, I think the point is not only accounting for things we know, because what's the whole iterative pipeline is we're keeping getting the feedback from the environment, and even there's like a signals that so because our surrogate model is not assuming like a structure from like either the disease model or something like that, so it's just like a black box model, so it's not assuming the specific structure or signal in the real world. So in principle, if we get the feedback which is reflecting the patterns, although it might have unknown like patterns, but if the model is is powerful enough, it can capture the signal and be able to predict. So for example, like those models with a large amount of parameters, if we fit it with larger amount of data, so that it's be able to capture the signals. And the uncertainty is basically reflecting, like if the feedback is different from what the model believes, then it gives us some like level of uncertainty or not aligned, so that gives us some decision making strategies.
Other questions? Okay, then thanks.